Perfect. All right, Keith, you are on.
Okay.
And with that, might as well start the week. Hope everyone had a good week. So
Yeah, it was hot.
it was hot. It was a hot
Yeah.
week. So I know Keith kind of stressed the water last week. He brought that up last week. So did everyone get out onto the trails this past week? How'd it go?
I walked the trail just because I'm a little skittish with like twisting my ankle or something. So what I did was I walked the trail. I went to Cole Park.
Okay.
And then I did another track workout.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, so that's kind of how I compromised.
Yeah, no, and that actually is good. Cole Park is a pretty good location for that. You know, kind of getting into trail a little bit and getting used to it. Did you go the trail around the lake?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And kind of just wandered the grounds a little bit and then did the trail around the lake. And so I think in total I did 3 miles of just walking. So, and then because I didn't run that, I did another track workout with the run the 100. Was it 100? Yeah, walk 100.
Run the straightaways, walk the curves.
Yep. So that was I like that.
Nice. No, that's good. That's good. And it doesn't matter how fast you go out on the trails. It's, you know, I just wanted you guys to get out onto the trails and kind of experience it a bit. So, so that way the intimidation factor comes down a little bit. So,
right. Yeah.
Anyone else get out there? I did not get out on the trails. I got into a cemetery, at least that much. There's a cemetery by my house that we run through regularly because it's just, there's not many people that go by and there's not any cars. So it's just nice to be able to,
quiet.
It's peaceful there. Yeah, it's quiet. So
there are people there.
What was that?
There are people there.
There are people there. There are a lot of people there. They're just not loud.
Yeah, right. It's a quiet party. I did South Mountain.
Oh yeah, you did South Mountain?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
I hiked it and jogged a little bit. It's a very rough terrain, and going up and down, especially going down, it can be difficult on the ankles. So I was very, very careful. But South Mountain is very clean, very nice.
Yeah, no, it is. It has a lot of good switchbacks to it, and definitely a nice. If you get to the right spot, you can overlook Binghamton, the whole valley from some specific spots through the trees.
That's the word I would use. The word beautiful. It's very beautiful. Get in there and very peaceful. Very nice.
Steve, I want to give you a chance since I know that you just call in, but
I also I just kind of ran out behind my house in the woods, kind of down the gas lines, a little bit of gravel road and a little bit of trail running.
Nice.
It was muddy.
So Steve's spoiled. He can just walk out his house and be right on a trail. That's great.
Got to maintain
him though. Steve lives out in the boonies.
Aha. All right. Well, this week I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So this week, I want you to do that again. Find another trail. You know, Sue, you could definitely feel free to walk it. You know, and it's just experiencing, you know, some trail, and once you get used to it, it just becomes second nature to go through. So, same workout. So definitely do some exercises beforehand just to engage the muscles for that particular work, especially as Keith was saying, there's a lot of like rocks and roots and kind of tough terrain at South Mountain. So some of those drills help with just placing our feet nice and lightly, which is what we want. So I just left the locations the same that I recommended last time, but Sue, I'm glad you went to Cole Park, and Keith, I'm glad you went to South Mountain, and Steve, I'm glad you can walk out your back door right onto the power lines. So that is great that you have those resources, and I just wanted to provide other resources for you. So like we said, we want to do, in terms of learning something new and experiencing something new, we want to do it in kind of 2-week intervals. So the first week is the first initial impression, and then the second week we're a little bit more familiar with it, and by the second week we'll feel a little bit better about it. So this week I wanted to talk a little bit about basic nutrition, and this one's a tough one because it's kind of there's a lot of fire out there with different groups and different organizations, nutritionists, and ideas about what should be the proper nutrition. And there's all of this information out there, and the question is, how do we weed through that information, which is a tough one. So that's what I kind of want to talk about a little bit today. So there was a nice quote from an organization called Food Matters that I really like, is "Fill your plate with the colors of the rainbow. What pleases the eye pleases the body." And which is true. I mean, it doesn't matter. And that's what this discussion is about. It doesn't matter what diet, it doesn't matter what fad, it doesn't matter what practice someone is in terms of what type of nutrition they are following, whether it's a typical American diet, whether it's going more towards vegetarianism, whether it's going into ketosis diet, whether it's going into paleo or veganism or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, they all pretty much agree that you should have colors. At the end of the day, it should be colors, and you should be eating a bunch of different colors. So it was something that I said, okay, you know what, this is a great one, because pretty much any type of diet or fad talk about that particular point. So in terms of some general things with nutrition, there are things called macronutrients, which provide energy, and you might see this, probably all of you are familiar with this, with macronutrients being fats, proteins, carbohydrates. They all provide different calories per gram, and I have the numbers for them. Fats provide 9 calories per gram, proteins 4, carbohydrates 4. Alcohol, which is spelled incorrectly, alcohol actually provides 7 calories per gram. Now, it's a non-essential macronutrient, but it still does, so I like to at least mention it, that it does exist. And then water's not really considered a macronutrient, but it is, because it's essential to all life. So that is what we focus on in terms of macronutrients. And some diets and some ideas about what type of foods we should be eating focus maybe more on higher fat or higher protein or certain carbohydrates and such. So there's a bunch of different thoughts out there on that. I'm not going to go too far into that portion, but just know that there are different ideologies on all the different macronutrients that are out there. In terms of carbohydrates, I wanted to focus on that a little bit. There's something called the glycemic index. And basically the glycemic index talks about and shows how quickly carbohydrates or sugars can be digested by the body. A higher number means it's digested much more quickly. A lower number means it's digested much more slowly. And years ago, there was a lot of focus on the glycemic index in the 90s, early 2000s, specifically for dieting and trying to lose weight. And it was all about looking at blood sugars and saying, okay, well, if something digests slowly, you're going to feel fuller for longer. And so therefore, try to eat things lower on the glycemic index. And that was kind of the idea many years ago. It's still kind of the idea, is that the slower that something is digested, the fuller you'll feel. So then you'll contain some portion control during the day. Because what did happen over the course of years, especially starting in the 70s, is there was a fat craze where everyone thought that fat makes you fat. Not necessarily the case. There are some fats that are not good for you. There are fats that are good for you. But a lot of places took out fat out of everything. So out of cheese, out of, you know, any of this stuff. Well, the only way to make it taste good is by putting in sugar. And so a lot of the companies did that with fat-free cheese, for example. They took out of the fat, they put in sugar so it tasted better. People felt good because they were eating something that was fat-free, but then you had to put sugar in to make it taste good. At the end of the day, what happens is with the glycemic index, things higher in the glycemic index digest faster. So what happens is you get this spike in blood sugar. And after a little while, then you get a crash. And it's something that I think most of us have either experienced or have seen, and have seen different people talk about, that you get this spike in blood sugar and then you get a crash. You get a sugar craving, and then you get a crash. And you have this cycle over and over again, basically, where you have a spike in blood sugar, and the crash happens because our bodies release insulin. The insulin takes up all of the excess blood sugar that we don't need, stores it as fat, but it overcompensates, and so we get that crash. And then when you get the crash, you eat more sugar, which then you have that again. You release insulin, you take it, you store it as fat, and then you have another crash. So sugar has been kind of shown as the evil person that's been out there, which I don't think that there are many diets out there, or any types of ideas for how we should eat, that doesn't focus on sugar as something that we should be moderate about, which is something that's great, right? This is all about, what does everyone really agree on? And colors, as well as sugar, moderation in sugar, are both things that pretty much every diet out there agrees with. I did put on the sheet for you a reference sheet for foods that are higher on the glycemic index and lower on the glycemic index. Most of us can kind of figure that out ourselves. You know, things that are more sugary, they're going to be higher. Things that are less sugary, you're going to be lower. Fruits and vegetables tend to be lower on the glycemic index. There are a couple that are higher, like watermelon. Watermelon's higher on the glycemic index, but you can't. It's hard not to moderate watermelon. I mean, you eat an entire watermelon, you're going to have a stomach ache. Like, it's just self-regulating. Where you can sit down and eat an entire loaf of bread in one sitting, or at least I can sit down and eat an entire loaf of bread in one sitting and then be like, ooh, I probably shouldn't have done that. So some of the fruits and vegetables do make us feel fuller for longer. And so that's a lot about the glycemic index and how it fills us. Now, generally speaking, the glycemic index, lower on the glycemic index, have more micronutrients. And micronutrients are considered vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. So we're talking about vitamin A, vitamin Bs, vitamin E. We have minerals like iron, magnesium, and then we have something called phytochemicals, which phytochemicals aren't really regulated too much out there, not really spoken about too much. So there's one in garlic called allicin that has an antimicrobial property. There's so if you ever heard of the home remedy of eat a thing of garlic if you're getting sick, that was the whole point behind it, and it does have microbial properties. As well as tomatoes have something called lycopene, and most of you probably remember the craze back in the 90s where the ketchup industry really took hold of this. And they said, oh, our ketchup is made from tomatoes, and therefore it contains lycopene. And lycopene, there was a study that had come out showing this is really good for heart health. And so they said, okay, well, ketchup comes from tomatoes, it must contain lycopene, therefore ketchup is good for heart health. Well, they also didn't take into consideration that heat, sunlight exposure, juicing, dehydration, any of these type of chemical processes and processing techniques destroy phytochemicals. And so at the end of the day, something like ketchup that's been through the ringer many times is not really going to have phytochemicals that are usable by the body. So, so the FDA did make them retract that after a little while, but it was a craze back in the 90s where everyone just took hold of it and just ran with it before it had to be pulled back a little bit. So generally speaking, things lower on the glycemic index have more micronutrients, have more vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals. And this is all stuff that we have heard before, right? Eat your fruits and vegetables. Whereas we want to avoid things that are more processed. At the end of the day, though, processing makes our lives a little bit easier. So if we have hectic lives, well, it becomes a little tough for us because we say, well, holy crap, like, what do I do for dinner? I'm not prepared today. And that's when processing techniques occur, and it is what it is. But generally speaking, I like to try to push us just to basically eat, eat our colors, try to drink lots of water, and try to eat things lower on the glycemic index. And generally speaking, you're going to have some sort of a healthy diet at the end of the day. So that's basic nutrition. Everyone is sensitive to different things. So some people are sensitive to gluten, which became a big thing. Gluten-free became a big thing. But there's a lot of other sensitivities. There are some people that are sensitive to strawberries or sensitive to watermelon, and they don't know it. They feel fatigued in certain ways, and they think that they're eating healthy, and then they just don't feel good. And nutrition comes into play there. There was someone who I was speaking to who talked about his wife was very dizzy. And it turned out, what was she allergic to? She was allergic to, I can't believe I forgot this. She was allergic to something bizarre that I was like, really? She's allergic to that? And, oh no, it was olive oil. She was allergic to olive oil. And as soon as she cut out, basically she did a week where she just ate boiled chicken. And the doctor said, all I want you to do is eat boiled chicken for the next week, and then we'll start introducing foods slowly. And she did. She ate boiled chicken within the next week, and she wasn't dizzy anymore. This is after being dizzy for like 3 years in a row, just every single day. She just felt like she was kind of on a boat type of feeling. And it was a sensitivity to olive oil. And in her diet, in the family culture, olive oil is a big staple. And it was just something that it's not typical. You think of being allergic to peanuts, or you think of being allergic to other things. And so it's one of those things that some food comes into play quite often, especially in today's world. So just want to kind of give you a little bit of overview with nutrition. I do want you to be a little bit skeptical in terms of any type of marketing that is out there, with any type of this is healthy or healthy choice, or different ideas that come into play with what someone's putting on a box. Because coming from a marketing field myself, they're out to get your eye. They want to grab your eye somehow. And so always be skeptical of exactly what they may be selling, because it may not be right for you. So that's what we want to look at. But so that's a little bit on basic nutrition. I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts or any questions or any experiences that they want to share.
I have a question. And this might not matter so much for smaller runs like 5Ks or something like that. But like if you were to do a half marathon, you probably wouldn't want to eat like protein before the race. You would probably want to eat more carbohydrates, because I heard somebody say that proteins, because it takes longer to digest, more of your blood flow is is directed towards the digestion process versus, you know, to your muscles, which you need when you're running. So
Yes. So before a race, generally speaking, yeah. When you go into higher intense activity like racing, you are using more blood sugar than you are using fat stores to propel you. And so, yeah, avoiding a little bit of proteins, but it not necessarily like I wouldn't suggest eating, 4 eggs and maybe a small English muffin. I'd say maybe eating an egg and an English muffin, type of thing, where it's more a little bit heavier carb focused. At least that's worked for me specifically, like morning of a race. That is kind of where I've gone with it. Now, it's very different in terms of trail running. So a lot of guys who are out there running 50 miles at a time, a 50-mile race, actually a lot of what they're eating is very like, they'll have aid stations like water stops, and they might have an aid station at 10 miles. And they get to the aid station, and literally at the aid station, it's not just Gatorade, water or whatever it may be. It's so you have your sports drink, you have water, and then they'll have a bucket of oranges. Then they'll have some bagels. Then they'll have some bacon. Then they'll have peanuts. Then they'll have, so they actually have real food that they're eating on these longer distance ultra runs. So it does depend obviously on the type of exercise you're doing. So like a long run that you're doing that's less intense than a race, eating heavier protein may not be a bad idea. Especially we can learn how to run and exercise with fuller stomachs, and which is very uncomfortable in the beginning. I used to not be able to eat or drink anything 2 to 3 hours before I ran. Throughout high school, it was miserable. If I got to practice was at 3 o'clock. So if I got to 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I hadn't eaten my lunch by then, it was going to be a rough practice. I got to the point where I was able to finish my dinner, just at home, finish my dinner at night, go out for a run right after. But it takes a little practice to get into that. So generally speaking, the idea is to go a little higher carbohydrate morning of. A little bit of proteins, a little bit of fats do help. If you're used to certain types of meals. So there's some people, I had a friend who he had his routine before a race. He'd had a bagel with cream cheese, and that's what he had every time. He had a bagel and cream cheese. It didn't matter what type of race it was. It just settled in his stomach really well, and he just got used to it, and that's what he did. So there is some science behind it, but it is also kind of what you've learned and what you've practiced. So if you're doing a half marathon or a marathon, and you typically do your long run on Sunday, and I'll get into this a little bit, you do your long run on Sunday, well, what are you going to have the morning of your long run? What are you going to have the night before your long run? And typically, whatever you're doing the night before, that's what you want to have the night before your race. So basically, you're not only practicing your running, but you're also practicing your lifestyle leading up to the race on what your lifestyle is going to be the day before the race or week before the race as well. So a long-winded explanation on your question, but I kind of wanted to elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess, like you said, individual dependent. Everyone has different foods that might bother their stomachs or, whatnot. So you kind of have to learn what works for you. And yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Keith or Steve?
No, but you may want to make a point of the day before the race. Some people have rituals of carbo loading, spaghetti dinners and all that stuff.
So there, I do know the science pretty well on carbo loading. There were some studies recently, I guess probably the past 10 years or so that came out talking about carbo loading, where you actually need to have a more intense workout 4 to 7 days before your race. And that day that you have the intense workout, kind of having a little bit heavier in the carbs department. And then the week leading up, kind of having more of a percentage of carbohydrates throughout the week than you typically do. But actually going more towards protein, slightly more towards proteins and fats the day before your race. 2 days before your race is when kind of the last carbo load area would be. It's more effective those who are running faster speeds. So the guys who are out running ridiculous 2-hour marathons, the carbo loading is going to affect them more than it will someone running at a slower speed. And that's just because at slower speeds, our bodies use more fat-based energy, whereas faster speeds, we use more carbohydrate, blood sugar energy. So it's actually 2 days before and further that you should be carbo loading, and then the night before doing some more fat protein based instead. Kind of interesting science after so many years of like doing the spaghetti dinners the night before. It's more effective with the half marathon than it is with 5K. 5K, you don't get much from carbo loading, but half marathon is you can definitely see more of an effect from it. All right. Well, thank you for signing on today. It was a good talk. If you have any questions, please, reach out. We're going to do another trail run this week and experience some more trails this week, and then we'll meet up next week.
Okay, great.
You could go on the same trail, right?
You can if you want. If you want to go on South Mountain again, or if you want to experience another one, Aquaterra is a good one. That one's a little bit more intense, but.
What about, have you ever been to State Park?
I have, yes. They have some wonderful trails there. Some really good trails at State Park. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking them out.
Okay, I'll probably be going there this week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a quick question that might be related. I gave blood about 2 weeks ago, and my runs have been 2 or 3 minutes kind of slower ever since.
Yep.
Is that common?
Very common. Very, very common, and typically more common in women. Now, granted, you gave blood, so obviously that's gonna be a big effect on you. I actually had an athlete years ago who we were training, and she was doing the workouts, and she was doing the workouts well, but just something didn't seem right, and we just couldn't figure it out. And then she went to the doctor, and she was highly anemic. So she started taking iron supplements, and it was incredible. Her performance was just slingshotted. Within a week, she felt 100 times better, and her times dropped. She was doing a lot of 400s and 800s by that point, and so her times dropped like by a minute per mile at that point. It was crazy how much it affected her. So giving blood, obviously, it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to kind of get back into a normal body pattern after giving blood. But yeah, completely normal to feel that way, without a doubt.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
I definitely think, I've done the track workout a couple times now. And then this past Saturday, I just went out for my regular run. And, normally I've been doing 3 miles with a couple stops or a couple walk breaks. This Saturday I did, I only took 1 water break, and I felt much better. And I think it's because I was doing, these different types of workouts that you've been recommending to us. So
yeah, that is typical as well, where you engage different energy systems within the body and different muscles within the body, and And then once you get back to your normal routine, you're like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good now.
Yeah. I've seen a difference. Yeah.
So nice. Oh, that's good to
Yep.
hear. Really good to
Yep.
hear.
Yeah. So thank you.
Certainly. All right. Well, good sharing. I like the successes here. So we've got 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. So what I want to do for the next 2 weeks when we come on back is talk a little bit about goal setting. Again, because what happens is after kind of following along with a program, you get these, like, it's called post-race blues, where you do a race and you completed something, and then it's like, okay, now what do I do? So we'll talk more about that over the next 2 weeks or so, just so you can continue this momentum that you've created so far. So, all right. Wonderful. Well, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.